Have you ever seen a technically strong production manager stall out? Not because they lacked competence, but because their relationship started breaking down. I might have done that at one point in time. And in plant leadership and operations management, we promote people for results. And when that candor disappears, communication gets guarded, that trust erodes between managers and frontline supervisors. And that performance management suffers, talent retention quietly declines. I've seen it across manufacturing. Brilliant leaders who hit production targets and just lose that room. Well, today, Morag Barrett and I are talking about why success at work isn't just about competence. It's about connection and how intentional relationship investment strengthens plant leadership and change management when it matters most. She's been doing this for a long time. It's a fun conversation, and she's an executive coach, a speaker, and multiple books. So let's jump in. And Mark, welcome to the show. So excited to have you here.
Trevor, I've missed you. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So yeah, I really enjoyed reading Cultivate. And it felt like you were writing for us manufacturing leaders because, you know,
Oh,
a lot of the times, we get promoted technically and we get promoted because we do results. And then like for a production manager, like sometimes we just kind of stall out. And where are you seeing that like in your leadership work and
well, I've had the opportunity in my career. I'll let you into a secret, Trevor. It's 40 years old. How on
no,
earth does that happen? I
you've been
mean, it
doing this since
explains
you
the
were
wisdom
two?
years. Oh, you little sweet talker. So, yeah, straight from high school. And it was interesting because I made a decision then not to go to university, but instead to do my degree at night school. And I entered into banking. And my first 15 years was all about numbers and metrics, both the metrics for the branch that I was in or the region that I was responsible for, but also for all of those client companies that were coming to my bank asking us to support them either in their growth plans or to navigate a stressful downturn in their industry. And as you touched on here, I have seen this movie play out time and time again. We're good at doing what we do, whether that's making widgets, creating
Mhm.
podcasts, it doesn't matter. And somebody says, you know what, Trevor? You should lead and coach other podcast hosts. And then what happens is we throw you in at the deep end and expect a sink or swim type approach to leadership and management. And what we fail to do is to articulate, well, firstly, we fail to even ask, is that what you want to do? But often
Mhm.
it's the only way to advance a traditional career or earn more money. And so we say yes. But we don't sit down then and say, well, here are how expectations shift with this new leadership level and new responsibilities. Here are the things you need to let go of. Here are the new things that you need to embrace. And here's the support to help you to acquire those skills. And so then we wonder why people get mislabeled as toxic bosses or
Yeah.
don't thrive in that new environment.
Yeah, I can relate to that being a good person and just making some bad choices in leadership, right? Where I weaned away from what was true to me, which was genuine relationships. And then I started like if someone had bad performance, sometimes I'd put a wall up a little bit. Well, I better separate myself a little bit. Right when I should have leaned in more to the relationship and kind of said, "Hey, what's going on? What's going on between us? And how am I showing up for you?" But I didn't always do that. And I wish I would have known then.
Well, exactly. And it's not that you did it out of ill intent. You don't know what you know now back then. And I think this becomes even more important when we think about the fact that the youth of today, which I say with love as the mother of three youths of today, they don't necessarily have the role models of how to show up, how to lead and manage, whether that's in a plant environment or a traditional office environment. How do we do it, especially when we have technology now impacting everything around how work gets done? And so that's
Mm.
at the heart of my research, my two books, especially that interpersonal piece, the who we are as individuals and how do we relate. It's easy to be a good boss or a good colleague on the good days when everything's
Yes.
working. It's when the proverbial hits the fan, that's the true test. And if we haven't invested both in the relationship health, but also our team building problem solving skills, that's when things become rocky and unnecessarily stressful.
Real plant managers, department managers, production managers, and there was just coincidentally, some conversations I had around, hey, I'm in a senior role. I'm leading some people that I had already worked with in different capacity. And now people aren't necessarily either delivering on what they said they're going to do, and it's just frustrating. And why wouldn't they? And then I'm seeing things that should just be done. And I just feel like I just need to be on top of it and tell them what to do. And I'm like, no, hold on, put on the brakes for a minute. But so how do you help leaders like when they get in those situations with their relationships?
And I have seen and coached leaders who have had sleepless nights and worried over having what they perceive as a tough conversation for weeks and months. Heck, I've done it. And that's
Hmm.
why I wrote both my books. So the first one, Cultivate the Power of Winning Relationships. That's the one that you've read and that you love. It's a fabulous book, now on its
It
second
is.
edition. And in it, I wrote it because in my banking career, I kept seeing when things go wrong, people are very quick to point the finger and blame. And
Hmm.
so in Cultivate, you'll discover what I call the relationship ecosystem, four relationship dynamics that we all recognize and experience at work. There's the ally, your friend at work, the person you go to celebrate the wins, but also to get the straight talking kick in the pants when you need it. There
Hmm.
are supporters. They are fair weather friends. They're fun to work with, to hang out with, but they're going to tell you what you want to hear, not necessarily what you need to hear. And then
Hmm.
as we move round to the dark side, you get rivals. Maybe there's a bit more elbow jockeying, and we're in competition for 5 minutes with our boss, the little bit of budget there is, or
Hmm.
maybe the next promotion. And then finally, there are adversaries where what you see is what you get. The premise of the book is we're not victims. No one sets out in the morning to be seen as an adversary, to
Yeah.
make your day miserable. But that's what happens. And it's how do we have the conversations that bring us closer to alignment, even if that's to agree to disagree. Because let's face it, in every organization, there comes a point where your boss's goals and my boss's goals might be in conflict. It doesn't mean that you and I have to go head to head. It's how do we work respectfully together in spite of those differences? And our second book, You, Me, We, Why We All Need a Friend at Work and How to Show Up as One, also gets to your question about I've now been promoted from peer to boss. Well, that is a
Hmm.
moment where we need to recalibrate the relationship. I'm done with the naive advice of, well, you can't be friends. The answer is you can, and you need to make it explicit that, hey, Trevor, I want us to preserve the relationship we had, but now as your boss, there are going to be times where I have to set goals that you may feel are more of a stretch. I may need to give you tough feedback, but let's talk about how that happens now. Because
Yeah.
then when I
Yes.
do have to have that tough conversation,
Mm.
I can link back to, hey, remember how we said this day would come? Well, here it is. But I'm doing it because I care. I'm doing it because I want you to be successful. Because let's face it, as your boss, I can't be successful if I don't set you and the whole team up for success. So, does that
Yeah,
answer your question? It's a long answer, but I'm so passionate about this.
because we talk a lot about change management, operations management, and then we run into the conflict resolution. But really, what I'm taking out of your work and your research is we just got to name it sometimes, right? And I think like you had that story about David in your book, and I could relate to that at a different level in the fact of, hey, you got to have some courage, right? And kind
Mm-hmm.
of pull that out to have that tougher conversation of, hey, what is going on with you and I? Because in manufacturing, what we call it is silos, right? We get silos
Mm-hmm.
between quality, materials, production, maintenance, and then all of a sudden we start to become rivals, right? And it doesn't help the company, it doesn't help individuals, well-being. And sometimes I get the whole like, Mark, why do we gotta be friends at work? And really,
Yeah.
like what I could have said was, Trevor doesn't have the skill to unpack on what's really going on. And I think it's the same reason why rivals start is that I know when I read your book, I was thinking about moments where I was running assembly and then there's a stamping group that feeds our department.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, look at, we're doing the best we can. And I kind of said to my boss, right? And it's like, we're killing it. It's those guys over there. And he's like, well, your bonus is based on the plant's performance. So I suggest you go over there and have a talk. And I was like, oh. And again, that's a good example of like pushing like, hey, they didn't say it explicitly, but it was like, you need to work on your relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't.
And bingo, why would you? Because you don't know. And so this goes back to my banking career, those politics silos and turf wars, they happen everywhere. But the irony is we all work for the same organization. This internal
Mhm.
fighting just undermines confidence, it undermines decisions, and it undermines results. And long term, it undermines individual leader credibility. And I can guarantee that your top performers are not going to hang around because why would I want to
Mm,
stay in a tense,
yes.
stressful environment? I'm going to go somewhere else. And it was interesting because you talked about well, we can't be friends at work. And I want to be clear that yes, you will meet people at work. We spend the most of our working
Mhm.
lives and waking lives in some sort of work environment. So you'd better hope we kind of like being around each other. But this
Right?
isn't necessarily friends where you're going to hang out after work and come home and meet my mother and we're going to be besties forever. Yes, you'll have those. But for our 9 to 5, let's
Mm,
hope that we can at least work respectfully together because certainly for some of my clients, whether it's the oil and gas, gold mining, it's literally life or death. And what we have found is the depth and the quality of our relationships has a huge impact on safety and success and happiness in our overall life. This matters.
yeah, I resonate with that. And I think our listeners are right now, because if you look at the plant manager, the production managers down to shift supervisors, down to frontline leadership, those behaviors emulate and transcend down the organization. So if I was,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a point where I was materials manager and I was having a bit of a riff with the quality manager because we need to make shipments, and then I could see, talent retention and the labor shortage out there. It's kind of like, well, now I see that, I'm not going to get along with the quality department either because I'm going to follow Trevor. And
Mm-hmm.
then so here we are, not intentionally, because we talk about our intentions don't matter, but what matters is how people perceive it. And then that trickle down to the organization, and we're just compounding the problem.
Yeah. Well, I know that in your work and in your upcoming book, you talk about 3 conversations that we need to be
Yeah.
having at all times. And I have something similar. I call it the relationship pulse check. And so,
Yes.
if the people listening to this conversation, if you ask these 3 questions, I guarantee not all in the same conversation, but over time, the health of your relationships will improve. And question number 1 is, what's working?
Yeah.
What's
That's
working? Easy start. Number 2
mm,
is what's not working? How am I making work more difficult than it needs to be? And then the third question is what's one thing I can do to help you or to help us to be more successful? And sometimes less experienced leaders, they'll say to me, oh, no, I can't ask that more because they're going to ask for the moon and we don't have budget
mhm.
for the moon. And I'm going, well, think of it this way. If you don't ask, as we know from science and research, people are going to assume that you're not asking because you don't care. And if you don't care, why should I bother either to do a great job or to hang around? Long term, that gap is going to cause issues. But if you ask and I say, well, give me the moon, Trevor, now you know the answer to a problem you didn't know existed. And there you get to say, yes, here's the budget. Or, you know what, Morag, I can't give you the moon, but here's a little star, and here's how I can help. But now I feel seen, valued, heard, respected, appreciated. And that's how you create a culture of connection, one conversation at a time.
But what I like, with the relationship, like I call it the relationship audit, you call it the relationship pulse, similar
Mm-hmm.
concepts. It's deeper than communication skills. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just going, it's more of a humanistic, normal approach. Like, hey, man, like what's working well between us? And then coincidentally, same week, I'm talking to my son and about some challenges he had with one coworker going to his boss. And I said, hey, I was just reading about Morag Barrett and her book, and I was talking to him about it, and he knows the work that I do. So I went through that with him, and he gave me a similar response, which production managers or plant leaders have given me, which is, well, what if they just say everything's fine?
Oh, so it's interesting you asked that because my signature keynote I've written is called Fine is a four-letter word. And I've just responded to a reporter who's writing an article about have we lost the art of connection and how are you, which immediately is followed by fine, has it just stops there. And it goes back to your earlier comment that this isn't just surface level transactional conversations, it's going one level deeper. And so, whether it's peer on peer, peer to boss, boss to team
Hmm.
member, creating an environment where we don't just, oh, I'm fine, but inside I'm stressed, anxious, overwhelmed, I'm worrying about my sick dog or whatever it might be, creating an environment where I can say, you know what, I've had better weeks, Trevor, but I'm looking forward to X. Or, this
Hmm.
week's turned out to be harder than I thought. Is it okay if I leave 30 minutes earlier? Because when we
Hmm.
do that, because let's face it, we all are going to have off days. We're all going to have moments in our lives where the universe serves us a curveball. And if we
Yeah.
have the relationships, if we have the allies who will run with that ball while we recover, then we will be able to repay that at the next time when it's your turn to have that
Hmm.
curveball. And this matters. It's not soft, fluffy. I've seen it transform organizational cultures, I've seen it transform teams, and I've seen it transform individual leader reputation.
So I'm a believer. Like I'm with you. Like if you try this, 9 times out of 10, it's going to work. Like, as far as, if they ask for the moon, like you said, or if they don't say anything. And so what do you say to leaders then if it's a matter that that other person doesn't really open up to that relationship pulse? My thought was, well, hey, you know what? Even if they give you something superficial and it doesn't really go anywhere, I believe that they're going to be thinking about your relationship differently.
Yes.
And that alone might be something. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's about consistency because this is never a one and done. It's
Ah,
the asking today, how are you, Trevor? And
yeah.
then when you go fine, you can say, well, what would make today 1% better? Or
Mm,
you say fine, and I go, what was most unexpected for you? I don't know, just ask
mm,
a follow-up question. And again, you
mm,
may get surface level, but
yeah.
then next week you ask the same, or next month.
Yeah.
And even if your spidey sense, because we're all hardwired for connection, our nervous system, our limbic system is all primed to say warning,
Yeah.
warning. So sometimes it will go off and you can't quite put your finger on it. Why? Well, if somebody chooses not to share, that is their prerogative. This is not an interrogation. But you can leave that door open that says, well, Trevor, if there's anything I can do, please come back. And role
Mm,
modeling it not just one on one, but in a team environment as well. Because if I have got something that requires more thought and more support, I may be hesitant to share because I've either seen others get punished for it, or I've heard the myth or the legend about so and so who got fired when they raised this tough subject.
Yes.
So, whatever's going on, I may not yet have the courage or the connection with you to choose to share.
Yeah.
But if over time you're asking, if you're also sharing, asking for help, asking for input, all of those are deposits into that relationship bank account that eventually will allow me to come and confide with you or confide with a colleague. And that is the culture where we are literally better together.
Mm, better together. Here I am pushing you, Mark, for like I want the quick fix, right? Like, what do you do if they don't say anything? But you gave the right answer because I had a boss before that, would say, and this was a guy that was more visionary, was sometimes, Trevor, you got to go slow to go fast. And that's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
hearing from you is that it's not about that one conversation that you had. It's like, hey, I asked you last week about how our relationship was going. Anything different in the last week? How are things going? Like it's like, oh my gosh, this person's like, it wasn't a one-off. It's not this person really does want to understand a relationship better. And maybe if we just keep on, have, like you said, have those follow-up questions. I like that. Like well, you're fine. So what would make it a little bit better today? Like we would talk about employee satisfaction. Like, isn't that better to have those types of conversations than how you doing? Fine. Okay.
I've had the opportunity to have these conversations, North Slope, Alaska, where it literally is life and death, 3 points of contact at all times. I've been down to gold mining operations in Chile and Peru. I've worked with healthcare clients, defense contractors, IT technology, you name it. It is the interpersonal relationships that make all the difference. And we talk about psychological safety, we talk
Mhm.
about physical safety and all of the rules. But ultimately, that comes down to our relationship safety. Because if I don't feel safe, if I don't care about you, I'm not going to call you out if you're not wearing your safety goggles or if you didn't double beak. All of these things and every small degradation of norms and rules undermine everything.
Mm.
And so, slowing down, as you said, to go fast, taking a moment at the beginning of each shift meeting to just say, we're here today to make X, and I also want to celebrate Y, who's been with the team for 3 years, or I want to celebrate the output that we created on the previous shift. So, not
Mhm.
just the what, but also the who.
Mm.
That's how we start to be seen as humans versus just a warm body that's going to move stuff through the sausage making machine. Note, I have not actually worked with a sausage manufacturer, though I'm up for that challenge.
I would be up for that. Yeah, we overcomplicate it. We spend more time, maybe behind a closed door talking about performance management, where really we just got to go in the room and just neutral environment and just kind of like lay it out. Like, what's going on? How how
Hmm.
how is this relationship? How do you rate how things are going?
And
Um,
sometimes it's just fine, and that's where it's going to stay, and that is
yeah,
okay too.
I guess
But
that's what I got to understand, and I need to practice that too. Is fine is okay right now,
hmm
but it doesn't mean we don't stop trying.
hmm
Figure out what else could be going on. So these leaders in these plants they're driving to work. When they get in there, Mark, what do you want them? What do you want them to be top of mind today after listening
Instead
to?
of just going to your station, hanging your jacket up, whatever it is, your normal routine, I want you to
Yes.
slow down, make eye contact, give them
Hmm.
a big smile. It's going to freak people out. But just slow down and check in with people.
Yeah.
Let them see and check in with you. And then you can get down to business. Because the old adage of it's not personal, it's just business, it's
Hmm.
BS. All business is personal and relationships matter. And I know, having worked with more than 15,000 leaders from around the world, that success in business is fueled by relationships. success in life is fueled by connection. And
Mm,
we are the common theme in each of those environments. So it's up to us to show up a little differently, to step up to those tough conversations, but also step up to the gushy ones of, you know what, Trevor, I really love working with you. When we
mm.
make the implicit explicit, that's when we remove any doubt in your mind. And now you know you can come to me if you need to. Now, whether you choose to, that's the next part. But right now, if you have somebody's back, if you have a colleague you would jump at the chance to work with again, I dare you. Send them a text message, a LinkedIn message, an email, however you want to communicate, that just says, hey, I was listening to Manufacturing Greatness with Trevor and Morag, and they were talking about best colleagues, and I thought of you, and you'll make their day. And when they reply back, I promise, goosebumps. I've done it with thousands of leaders. It is so straightforward, but transformational.
More you. Like our industry needs that whole depth of knowing that this is investment for long term. And if you've had 3 injuries in the last 6 months, then there's going to be some relationship issues because to truly we talk about safety culture, safety behavior.
Mm-hmm.
That is based on those relationships. And if you're having those really conversations and you're complimenting and you're calling out weird comments and inviting to unpack that, then you're going to find out what's going on and people aren't going to get hurt as much because like you said, in those industries, it is life or death. Last piece of advice I got to ask you. When when people sometimes, maybe you're trying to have that conversation and they throw out something sarcastic, like something about sarcastic about like, well, I'm probably gonna passed over for that next promotion. You're gonna get it anyways. So, like when people kind of really veer, and sometimes I'll throw people off. And what I've seen is, well, we don't know how to respond to it, and then we just kind of like move away from it. But how would you hit that head on? How do you hit that on in relationships when people say something off?
So the pause and silence is your friend in this moment. Because, I mean, and every situation is different. So if it's an off color remark,
Yeah.
then a pause that says, I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that. Can you repeat it?
Ooh.
Because now they have to do it cold.
Mm.
Or I'm sorry, can you I didn't get the joke. Can you explain that to me?
Mm.
Again, now they have to do it cold. It's awkward. I've learned that that wall of Britishness, if you want to call it, doesn't serve anybody. So I've learned to let the cracks show and a little bit more of my personality show. But
Mm.
each of these, it's like an invitation to dance. We're not expecting you to reveal everything about your childhood, your inner thoughts, your worries, your dreams, your aspirations. But we can all share one nugget more about what excites us, what what annoys us. Because in knowing,
Mhm.
we can then choose to shape that environment so that we can all thrive. So my answer is pause, say thank you, maybe, and then move back, which is, well, thank you for sharing. We can come back to that another time. Right now, I'd love to talk about this problem, this shift, this
Yeah.
moment. So
Yeah. You're
listen,
good.
pause, thank you. And sometimes just let it go.
Oh, just know it's I guess maybe that's the wisdom, right? Knowing at that moment which one of those to choose. But here's what here's what you gave us today. You gave us some great choices. You gave me some ideas that I haven't tried before. So I'm going to try some of those.
Thank you.
And so for our listeners, so on the website, I do a book report every month, and there is my takeaways from your book, Mark, on Cultivate, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's also a link to this show is on the website with this summary of it. And but I know that our listeners are going to want more. So how do they best follow you and your podcast, People First, and tell us about that?
Well, there is that. So I have my own podcast, People First, which is leaders at all stages of their career talking about how their research, but also the importance of relationships at work. If you're planning an event and are looking for a speaker, then call me. I have a bit of an accent, I'm told, but I would love to be involved. And either way, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's me that posts, it's me that replies. And also you can find me at SkyeTeam, SKYE team.com.
We'll leave those links in the show notes. And thanks for helping us be better versions of ourselves today, Morgan.
It's my pleasure, Trevor. We are better together.
And these relationships, they're not soft, right? That's what we heard. And it's a performance infrastructure. So if you're leading a plant and identify with one relationship that's neutral or strained, initiate that pulse check like she talked about in the relationship pulse check. Don't wait for that performance. Do something today and let's take some action. And if you're in for more practical leadership for manufacturing, please go to manufacturinggreatness.com/subscribe. And I look forward to interacting with you.